And finally tonight, political turmoil in Venezuela. The head of the national legislature, Juan Guaido, declared himself interim president and was recognized as such by President Trump and leaders of several other nations. But incumbent Nicolas Maduro seems to be standing firm against the movement. So, Christian Barnard, should the US be supporting Juan Guaido, or is this meddling in another country's affairs unnecessarily?
I don't think the recognition on its own is a bad idea. For a long time, the United States has been very unhappy with, and justifiably so, with all the actions of the Maduro regime and the Chavez regime before it. But now it's really hard to know where you go. If you just to recognize an interim president is one thing, but to actually help him get the real power that he'll need to govern is a totally different thing. And while the international community at large might be recognizing Guaido as the legitimate president, Maduro still has the loyalty of a lot of the executive branch, which has overrun the National Assembly, which is the legislative branch that Guaido is the head of. So where you go from here is a very, very difficult question. I think the United States needs to tread very carefully, because anytime they exhibit any kind of hawkish language, Maduro actually uses that to stir up his base and say, look, these DC swamp dwellers, he doesn't say that, but want to come in and take over. And it actually plays to his favor. So Trump earlier, I think yesterday, said that he wasn't ruling out military intervention. I think that is very unwise to say. It actually is playing right into Maduro's hand.
Yeah, and indeed the Venezuelan military do say that they are still behind President Maduro, or if we call him President Maduro now, I'm not sure. So how do you view the Trump administration's actions here?
Well, I think, there's been a lot of talk in recent months, more and more, about how the United States were kind of sliding back into the Cold War because of Russia meddling in our elections and other things that are going on. This episode is, I think, really reminiscent of the Cold War, because throughout the Cold War, for decades, you had Russia and the United States in Latin America, throughout Latin America, supporting different governments, different factions, and actually overthrowing both sides, overthrowing or paying local folks to overthrow democratically elected governments. I think one thing that's actually better about this episode is that it's playing out we talked about the internet, it's playing out in public. The previous histories that I'm talking about in the Cold War, it was done completely in secret. The CIA had these secret slush funds. The KGB had their secret slush funds. And we often, the Americans, didn't find out about. Pinochet was an example in Chile. The Shah of Iran was an example there. The Americans often didn't find out about these secret covert operations for years. And now, at least, it's happening in real time. So I think that's an advantage. But I think the bigger point is that you've got Russia on one side here, you got the United States on the other side with most of Western Europe. Turkey, even though it's a NATO member, is an unsettling exception. This is feeling more and more like the Cold War, only it's going to be played out on the internet.